Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Coming at you 3 weeks after Jaylen Brown signed a $300 million extension, but somehow I am still stunned. 3 weeks later.
That was a wild day 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It really was 3 weeks
ago. It felt like yesterday when the Knicks waived Trevor Keels.
Also still stunned by that.
Time really flies, man. It's crazy.
But wasn't it crazier when they then traded for Paul George and they didn't have to trade RJ or Emmanuel quickly? That was nuts.
What's the wildest thing that could happen between when we're actually recording this and when we're trying to put on that we recorded this?
Jaylen Brown could get $304 million. Oh wait, that actually happened.
That actually did happen.
It did happen. I think it would be the Clippers finding a way to get James Harden, the Sixers getting a crappy package, and then Joel Embiid being like, I want out of here. I'm a newly married man. I've got a life decision to make now. Big things for me this year. Get me out of here. And then the Knicks were like, okay, hey, we're here. We're waiting.
In all seriousness, where would you rather raise kids, Philly or New York? I mean, that's not even...
We're biased, though. We're biased for a reason, because New York is better.
Yeah,
that's right. Sure. Yeah, Philly. Sorry, children listening.
Well, now you've made the argument the other way, because it implies that children raised in New York grow up to be cursing, swashbuckling pirate cursors. I don't know where I was going with that.
I'll say this. I mean, that commute from Westchester to MSG is going to be so brutal for Joel Embiid's knees. Just sitting in a car, trying to get through that Henry Hudson traffic. It's just too much. Meanwhile, in Philly, Camden's just down the road. It's an easy commute. It's in another state, but it's closer than Tarrytown. So, got to consider the care aspect of Embiid.
Well, thankfully, yesterday they announced that they're moving the Tarrytown practice facility to the penthouse
Staten Island.
Staten Island. That'd been a funnier joke. I was going to say they moved it to the roof of the garden. It's just they're going to build a gym on top, but further away would actually be a funny.
Hey, listen, Staten Island.
It's in Tottenville now. That's just where it is.
I was about to say it's in
Suffolk
right
County.
Away,
No, it's in Suffolk County.
Oh my God.
They put it in
the fucking Knicks practice facility or something.
They put it in Stony Brook.
Actually, it's in Sunset Park now, right next to the Nets.
There you go. There you go.
Perfect. Anyway, we're off to a rousing start. So today we're picking the worst Knicks losses of the century, following up on last week's episode, which also again seems like we did it yesterday. This one should be interesting. Andrew, you've used the word therapeutic a few times in previewing what you think how this episode is gonna wind up. I just want to say at the outset, and then turn to you guys, and then we'll start drafting. Like the wins, the great wins, as I was thinking through them, like, oh yeah, that really stands out. Oh yeah, that really stands out. And yet, as I went to go make my list for this, it's just a sea of misery where it's like trying to parse one water molecule from another. So I actually found this to be a bit more challenging, but Jeremy, I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, therapeutic isn't exactly the word that comes to mind for me. It's more about, hey, remember these old wounds that you thought healed? Well, what if we just tried to open those back up and just make this a pain point? So, but I do think there is a logic to, we can at least commiserate about how awful it is. And it's not like the Knicks are a bad team where it just feels depressing. Sure. It's kind of like, the Knicks are on the rise. They had a good season last year, one of their best of this century, if not, I'll say one of the two best of this century. So it's nice to be able to reflect on when things were bad, knowing that things are going to be looking up as we move forward. So that's why I am totally fine with this exercise. For the next however long this takes, it'll be, damn, that hurts. But after that, and the fact that we have the three of us to kind of joke around about a lot of these losses, it'll be fine.
We'll see how much joking goes on in this episode. Andrew, any thoughts before we start?
Well, Jeremy hit on it. Misery loves company. And while I think there's 2 years that you and I will commiserate over that Jeremy doesn't have the reference point for, I think there's 2 years that the three of us were actively involved covering the team that we'll get to parse out some feelings and maybe revisit some old conversations that leads to the therapy that I'm referencing. I'm very curious how this episode goes, as someone, just the way I process a lot of my non-sports related failures, or to talk about them. So when we're talking about the Knicks related failures, I'm curious to talk about them and how much where the conversation leads and how much old stuff gets brought back up,
This is worst losses of since January 1st, 2000. I'm not even going to try to set out parameters for like if you're listening to this, whatever you think worst losses means to you, that's how you should judge us by, because every person has a different kind of internal definition for what a bad loss is. And I think probably the less said about it, the better. I don't have anything else. Andrew, if you want to pick the draft order.
Let's do it. So I just did one little shuffle. In fact, we'll do another, so it ends up on the microphone. There
Sounds
you go.
Like you don't trust yourself. I don't know.
I'm making sure the audience knows that they can 100% trust me. I'm validating and reassuring their trust, Jonathan.
Okay.
What?
No, I was going to say the audience doesn't care nearly as much as me and you, as the three of us do. Like, I would hold your feet to the fire if I thought that there was shenanigans, but I just...
Well, John, your card is a 3. There you go. That worked out perfectly.
Shenanigans.
Jeremy, your card, after I do another shuffle...
Are aces high?
Aces, what do we want to call it? Aces high or low?
Aces could be high. I don't care.
Aces high. Okay, Jeremy, your card is a queen. Oh, this is trending in a Jeremy direction. My card, the last card to be drawn. Let's see what Carmelo Anthony game is going to get taken from me today. I get a 7, so I'm in the middle.
Why would you want to take a Melo? You like Melo. Why would you want to make it? And
it's why there are many games from his era, John, that stand out as losses that were painful to me, my friend. If you were a Melo stan like I am, there would be games that stand out to you. But as we discussed the other day, you're the biggest one that exists.
I'm the biggest Melo stan because I
course,
it's greatest win of the century. So slightly different ground rules for this one. We're doing 6 rounds. 2 playoff losses need to be picked. And I'll preface this by saying we wanted to make it because, like, obviously recency bias. I think terrible losses that happen more recently, just kind of stick out. But at the same time, we don't want to overdo our draft with like a ton of losses from this year or a ton of losses from the year before. So we're each going to be forced to take 1 loss from this past season, the 22-23 season, 1 loss from the season before that, the 21-22 season. So obviously 1 regular season that resulted in a playoff appearance loss, 1 regular season that resulted in a non-playoff appearance loss, and then 2 other regular season losses from any season, playoff or non-playoff season, between January 1st, 2000 and the end of the 2021 season. Correct, Andrew? Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. I think that's it. So Jeremy has first pick.
Yes, I do.
I'm fascinated, by the way. I don't have a strategy for this. I'm just going to tell you guys.
Sure. I'll say this. There is a very early game that I could pick that I think would piss off both of you. But seeing as how I was not able to view that game because I was just too young, I'm going to let that game fall into one of your hands unless it comes back to me. So in the meantime, I'm going to pick a game that had a tremendous impact on me and you both as well, and a lot of people listening, which is going to be the 2013 Eastern Conference semifinals, Game 6. The Knicks lost to the Pacers, 106-99. And if you look at the box score, you'll see that Roy Hibbert had 5 blocks. And that won't mean anything. But if you watch the game, you'd know how soul-crushing it was to see Carmelo Anthony get blocked by Roy Hibbert. And that whole series look, nothing... Let me take a step back. With the Celtics series, we talked about in the last pod, where just a relief to get out of that. So I didn't feel too confident, and J.R. Smith just didn't look like himself after everything.
No.
So I didn't feel as confident going into the second series, but I still thought, look, the Knicks and the Heat are destined to meet each other in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks are just an incredibly deep team. This can work. And game one rolls around and the Pacers win that one. And suddenly, crap, okay, well, Knicks can find a way to come back and they have a really nice game two. And then it just winds up where the Knicks have to fight for their lives in Indiana. And it's not like they haven't had success in a game six in Indiana in the past, but this one just felt so demoralizing. And despite 39 points from Melo, it just felt like crap this whole game. And it just was deflating because in that moment, there was a part of it where it's like, yeah, this team after 54 wins, they're an older team, one of the oldest we've ever seen. They can come back. And then to see later on, I was like, oh, the contribution to replace some of the players lost was trading for Andrea Bargnani. Great. Awesome. This is perfect. So I think this game was so much of, and I didn't fully realize it in the moment, but it really felt like the end of an era that didn't end for another few years. And then the Knicks were toiling away and then they kept toiling. And then fortunately, good things started to happen right before the pandemic with the Knicks hiring Leon Rose and the team becoming a better franchise. So this one hurts because it felt like this should have been the high watermark, and it was, of the 2010s. But just to think that game 6 of the Eastern Conference semifinals is your high watermark for an entire decade, that hurts. So this is my first choice.
I think I'm not sure if it's the pick that I would have gone with. I think it's the chalk pick of the draft, for what it's worth.
It's like top 4 or 5 for me. It's in there. So I don't disagree with the pick at all. And as far as frustrations go, you mentioned Melo having 39. I'll point out J.R. Smith shooting 29% from the field in this series. I don't know if you guys found this during the research, but the parallels, not the full playoff runs, maybe just in the moment because how intently we were covering it and staying up till 3 a.m, John, like the parallels to 2022, 23 that this season's end had, it's literally the same map of the playoffs where you lose game 1 and you never regain home court advantage. Game 6, your best player scores almost 40 points. Brunson obviously scored 40 points. He needed one other guy to show up, and his second best player, J.R. Smith, goes 4 of 15. It's almost comparable to Randall going 3 of 14. Yeah. And like the Melo block with Hibbert is not comparable to Brunson's turnover because Brunson like almost had a perfect game. But man, just the parallel feelings. And Jeremy, I'm praying that I this was a much younger team that just lost in 6 to the Heat. I'm praying this isn't the high watermark for this regime, and losing in 6 games isn't like the highest moment of the decade.
I'll just throw in the other difference. Nobody else showed up to help Brunson in the fourth quarter of the one we just witnessed. Chris Copeland and Iman Shumpert gave Melo a little bit of assistance in that
specifically that third quarter. Yeah.
Well, third, fourth, when they were made the comeback, because I forget what they were down by, but they were down by a good amount. Yeah, it's a good pick. Andrew, you're up.
So I'm up and I will go. It's too recent to go with game 6 versus Miami. I also have much more of I have just much more good memories from this past playoffs. And I think, Jeremy, to your point about it aging the way that it does, the loss to Indiana, realizing that was as good as it ever got, adds to why it's so bittersweet that they didn't even get a chance to play the Heat. So I co-sign that sentiment.
3-1 against Miami.
3-1.
Look, I know it doesn't matter.
2-0 against the Spurs. Yeah.
Right. Like I know they were 3-1 against this Miami Heat team this past year, and still it didn't work out. But it just when it's battling with LeBron again, the Heat probably could have washed the Knicks, but it was still that hope, and it's the hope that kills you. And it was also the Hibbert block that was emblematic of that.
So I'm gonna go with another game starring Carmelo Anthony, and I'm really glad I get it because it's going to be almost an honorable mention to the last draft that we did because it's a loss.
Oh, I think I know where you're going. Yeah.
But I felt like that the Knicks won. Let's go back to game 2 of the first round in the 2010-2011 NBA playoffs, specifically the 2011 NBA playoffs. The Knicks lose 96-93. Carmelo Anthony scores 42 points, has 17 rebounds, and gets 6 assists. Was a one-man wrecking crew against a Celtics team that won over 50 games, I think 56 games that season, and was looked at to be contenders for the NBA title after suffering a heartbreaking game 1 loss that may come up again on a Ray Allen 3-pointer. He was insane. Amari leaves this game early with an injury and he keeps them in it. I thought that they were getting back in the series, seeing how close they were. This is a Carmelo Anthony vote because I think this is one of the best games he ever played as a Knick. And it's a shame that Jared Jeffries couldn't catch, or else maybe the Knicks win this game. But instead they go down.
Another parallel with Julius.
Oh, there you go.
The pass wasn't maybe as on target, but
so that would more be the Mitch to Jared Jeffries comps because of how many passes Mitch dropped. But you're right in the fact that he threw it to Julius and he dropped it. This was the realization of what I thought the Knicks could be with Carmelo Anthony, because there was some rocky stretches during that first 20 or so games after the trade where it's like, all right, maybe this isn't the guy. And then in game 2, the guy showed up and I was reminded of what this team could be with Carmelo Anthony as its best player. So I know it's not the worst losses, but I wanted so badly to be able to add this to the biggest wins, and I'm not even risking you guys taking it from me. So
that's fair.
I'm making sure I get this Melo game as my first pick.
All right. It's a good pick, and you made both of you guys combined to make my life easy. I think these were the proper top 2 choices for worst playoff losses. With the, again, Andrew, you nailed it. Game 6 Miami is recent. So, and there's still so much good feelings about that season. I still think it might get drafted. I may draft it. I'm not going to draft it right now, though. I have 2 picks. The first pick is going to be easy for me because I referenced on the Best Wins episode that I wrote a top 10 most, the games that we will remember when we think back to the season 20 years from now. Most of those were wins. 2 of them were losses, including my number 2 ranked game. And is a game that I will never, ever, for as long as I live, forget the feeling as it was happening and after it was over. And as I tried to put that night into words, and that is the regular season loss this season to the Mavericks. First time in, 13,884 games, I think.
Yep. Nailed it.
That's again, it's one of those numbers that's going to be seared into my brain that a team had, this I may get wrong, a 13-point lead with 90 seconds left, I think it is, and lost the game.
It was 9-point lead. 9-point.
It was a 9-point lead with 30.
It was 9-point lead with 30 seconds left. Yeah.
9-point lead with 30 seconds left.
Shout out Benji on the playback being like, I think the Knicks got this one. And then you just be like, shut up.
And look, it'll be a game that certainly every Mavericks fan, and I think any other NBA fan who witnessed it will remember as, one piece of many pieces of evidence of Luka magic. We in New York, me, I'll speak for myself, will always remember that game a little bit differently because, and the worst part about it, I don't know that the Knicks, they were down Jalen Brunson, and then whatever it was, a minute into the game, they were down RJ Barrett. I don't know that they've fought harder in a game all season. They played their asses off. They gave it everything they had. So many guys played so good, and it's not like you could pin it on one guy. Like Grimes had that late turnover, but he also did so many good things. So it was just absolutely heartbreaking. It was difficult to process in the moment. So that's going to be my first pick.
One thing.
Yeah.
Well, okay. 2 things. First of all, there was a spin zone that we were trending toward that during the end of the season. That ended up not mattering because they tanked their way to the 10th pick. But the ability to be like, well, that blowout loss at the Garden and then that rare 1 in 13,884 chance win that they got actually helped them get the 11th pick. I was rooting so hard for that spin zone, and then unfortunately the Mavericks didn't cooperate. Shout out to the late Jonathan Tjarks of The Ringer. That was this honestly is why this loss has softened a lot for me, John.
This is a good call.
Seeing his wife post on Instagram that this was their first game that they attended after Jonathan passed. They grew up in Dallas, big Mavericks fans. Even when he went to The Ringer to write, he referenced like, I'm still in Dallas. I'm still like leaning Luka, leaning Mavericks. This was their first game since they lost their husband, lost their dad. And I was like, you know what? My misery was their moment. Like I'm able to see this matters more. Having said that, 13,884. I co-sign this as your loss for last season.
I don't even think this was the worst Mavericks loss in association with the Knicks, though. Like, so, and I'm not even just talking about in the games that the Knicks played the Mavericks. For what it's worth, I knew this wasn't going to come back to me, but if it had, I would have taken this exact game, John. But the fact that the Mavs blew a game to the Bulls, the second to last game of the season, and then hurt the value of the pick in the lottery odds from the Knicks perspective, and then dropped the game after that, that just made it feel like, okay, so you'll blow out the Knicks at home, or at least you blow out the Knicks at MSG. You come back and win off of this insane Luka game in Dallas, and you sabotage the pick, so you get to keep it, and you get to then keep the pick. Yeah. So, look, on the bright side, Knicks got Jalen Brunson, so I'll take it.
So I think we got the better of that that totality of transactions. My second pick, there's a number of different ways I could go, but this is absolutely going to be a pick that I'm going to make with my heart here. There's a few picks I'm going to make with my heart. I hope I have the opportunity to do so throughout this draft. But when I say I'm going to make this pick with my heart, here's what I mean. There were a lot of times and a lot of years where I felt, again, I won't speak for either of you, genuine shame and embarrassment being a Knicks fan. And I'm not sure there was ever more shame associated with my fandom than when the New York Knicks decided, as a promotional tool, they were going to bill a particular week during the 2008-2009 season as Dream Week, which was basically a way to say, come watch our shitty basketball team get dumped on by the best players and teams in the entire league. And as they promoted it, it was like, wait, do you understand what you're doing? You suck. And you're exploiting the fact that you suck and knowingly saying, watch these teams come into our building and remind everybody how much we suck. And he's not my favorite player of all time, but man, if there's one guy over the last 20 years who knew how to capitalize on a moment, it was Kobe Bryant. And he's like, this is what y'all are doing? Fine, I'll oblige. And he came and he dropped 61 deuces all over the Garden court and danced and like it was fucking nothing. And I remember sitting there watching that. I'm like, so wait, this is what you wanted, right? This is what you wanted to happen? And it happened. And it was just like, what are we doing here? What the fuck is this? This isn't a basketball franchise. This is a circus. And so the first game of Dream Week, in which Kobe dropped 61 and the Lakers beat the Knicks 126-117 on February 2nd, 2009. That is my second pick.
So just to capitalize on the entire week, on Monday.
Do you want to go through the other ones?
People might not know what you're talking about, John. Like we should add context.
Sorry, we should say the other two. The other two games were against the Cavs and Celtics, the defending world champion Celtics, I should say. So
they got Kobe on Monday, in which, as John mentioned, he had 61 points and set the Madison Square Garden record, passing Bernard, which added to it. The second game was against LeBron and the Cavs. And I want to see, did they officially change it in the book? They did change it. So at the final buzzer, he had 52, 10, and 11. A 50-point triple-double.
That's not the same now?
No, they changed. I remember them taking away the one rebound. So he ended up with 52, 9, and 11. And then the last one being the defending champion Boston Celtics coming in, concluding Dream Week with a 3-game losing streak, 110 to 100 over the Knicks. So,
good job, guys.
Yeah,
awesome stuff. Really wonderful.
I feel like you just did a post game for that week. I feel like I'm catching your raw emotions, which is the point of this exercise.
Just an absolute fucking. Keep going. Go to the next thing.
I love how we've gotten here, Jeremy.
Yep.
Okay. So, the 2012-13 postseason. Game 6 is obviously the nail in the coffin. It was a sad night for me and many a Knicks fan because the season was over, a 54-win season that, if we were all honest with ourselves, I don't know how we were beating the Heatles especially after they won 27 straight. Would have wanted to see it. But the fact that you don't get that opportunity, it sucks. There's a loss that annoys me more than, honestly, the Game 6 loss or even the Game 1 loss at Indiana. So let's go to Game 5 against Boston, because the Knicks had momentum. They're rolling into the playoffs. They win 14 straight, then have this fluke loss in overtime against the Bulls. Then they beat the Pacers to clinch the 2 seed. And they roll into the playoffs, winners of like 16 of their last 18 games. They go up 3-0 on the defending champs. They're about to make quick work of Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and send them off into obscurity. And J.R. Smith elbows Jason Terry midway through Game 3 and gets suspended. He gets suspended for Game 4. And the Celtics are able to avoid the sweep. The Knicks are missing their second best player and 6th Man of the Year winner. And the Celtics rally and win Game 4. So then you're thinking, all right, they get their one. The Knicks will show up for Game 5, and this will be a quick sweep. But what they decide to do is wear all black because they're going to a funeral. And I'm curious if this has ever worked, but in the pregame, seeing them show up in all black and just like, oh, that's not a good sign. This is a veteran team. This is a lack of focus. This is, counting the chickens before they hatch. And the Celtics go on to win this game and force a game 6. J.R. Smith, this was the beginning of a very annoying shooting slump for him. This again, 29% from the field in the Pacers series. The Knicks lose this game at home 92 to 86. Melo has 22 points on 24 shots. He couldn't get a bucket. J.R. Smith goes 3 of 14 from the field in this game. And every single thing that was working in the first 3 games just disappears. Missing defensive rotations. And even just more so, you gave a veteran team a reason to get off the mat. And it was the first time that I thought the conference finals matchup against the Heat was in jeopardy. And lo and behold, all of those fears came to fruition in the Pacers series, which is why the Pacers series, I was so annoyed by them that we even had to worry about the Celtics series. And it starts here. It starts with Game 5 that I have to go there. Honestly, you picked Game 6, John. I was so annoyed watching that game.
No, Jeremy picked Game 6.
Oh, Jeremy picked Game 6. So, no, I meant Game 6 against Boston in the wins draft.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes.
You picked Game 6. And, I get it. They clinched it. Melo hit some big fourth quarter shots. The Celtics went on a 21-0 run in that fourth quarter to cut a 25-point lead down to 4. And I was like, they're really all the jokes that I've ever made about the Yankees are now going to come back in my face because the Knicks are also going to blow a 3-0 lead. I couldn't believe we were trending in that direction. Thankfully, they didn't. But this was the beginning of this was the most frustrating loss of that season that meant so much to me. So I'm going to pick it.
Good call.
I love how your perspective is, oh no, I can't believe that everything I did to Yankees fans I have to deal with. And my perspective was, Do I have to deal with a second New York team of mine blowing a 3-0 lead to Boston?
Mm-hmm.
This is a good pick, and I'll tell you why it's a good pick, because I probably would have picked this game. And the reason I would have picked this game is this was my high school graduation present. I went with my dad, and we went to this game. You said the score was 92-86. It wasn't really 92-86. It was 92-83. J.R. Smith hit a bullshit 3 with a second to go, and it was like, cool, you're still down 6. This is a loss. And it was like, now you finally decided to show up at JR. Great. I still contend that his elbow got messed up when he did elbow Jason Terry, and that's what caused the slump. This game was awful. Obviously went into it thinking, great, gentlemen sweep the Celtics in some capacity, and you move on to the next round and then take care of business with the Pacers and it's back to the Heat. And so this game definitely stung. And it showed that there were cracks in the armor, but I kind of ignored them at the time, just thinking, well, it was a real bummer because I wanted to see them win in person and clinch this, and now have to worry about game 6 and potentially a game 7. Glad it didn't get to that point, but this one definitely stung a lot.
I co-sign. Yeah, this is probably the most the three of us have commiserated over a loss that wasn't because we weren't doing content or anything like that. I'm still mad that they wore all black in game 5. I remember the TNT crew roasting the Knicks, being like, y'all haven't won anything, and you're going to a funeral for game 5. This is a championship team, regardless of how we feel about those Celtics today and how they hoist that 08 banner like it counts for 6, but that was a battle-tested team. You're a 2 seed randomly, and you're pulling these type. Man, I'm still mad about it today. Go ahead, John. Jeremy, you're up. Go ahead,
Jeremy's up again.
I just didn't know if John had any comments, but
no, I don't have anything. You guys nailed it.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got 2 picks, and I think I'm going to go with I'm going to go with a regular season loss from the 2021-22 season as my first game.
Okay.
And that is going to be the very final game before the All-Star break, which was Knicks and the Nets and MSG.
I thought it'd be there for me.
It was, well, you thought wrong, sir. It was a playback game, which was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was.
So for every Celtics-Knicks comeback, you get at least one that was a devastating blown game. Cam Thomas scoring 21 points to help the Nets storm back from down 28 points. That was the game where it was truly, they're done. There was a slim chance, but this is the metaphorical nail in the coffin. Even if they still have time to come back, they're not coming back. I think the thing about this game that also made it so frustrating was we just come off of a week earlier of the Knicks didn't do anything at the deadline. And there was so much pent up aggression of this is a full roster. There are players who should not be playing on this team anymore. And yet they're still seeing time. Why are we going about this? This whole season feels like a waste. What is the point when you just made the playoffs last year? Everything, this game essentially, it felt like an entire mental break for the Knicks. And I just had no joy watching the Knicks after that. I really didn't have a ton of joy that whole season, but especially after that point, it was really this team could honestly tank, but they won't tank and they won't bench a lot of their players. So what are we doing here? Fortunately, All-Star break, they shut down Kemba, shut down Noel, more minutes, but then you still have Alec Burks running the show. And it's just, that was the aftermath of it. That's a little separate to it, but it builds on the fact where the Knicks were neither buyers nor sellers a week earlier. And then the Nets don't even have Kevin Durant in this game or Kyrie Irving. No one was there. James Harden wasn't there. It's like, you're really telling me that this is how it goes down? Great.
It was the combination of who it was on. First of all, it was the fact that it was the Nets, A. B, it was who was on the Nets or who was playing for the Nets that night. None of their big guys. And then C and D, I'll kind of combine into one. This was not the first or the second or even like the third or the fourth time this had happened. This was this Knicks team by that point. That was their identity by then. A couple of games earlier, they were outscored by the Blazers, who could not have been tanking any harder, 35-11 in the fourth quarter for that comeback. There was a few more comebacks right around that range, and which leads me to the last point about that game. As soon as the lead started to dwindle down, like it got under 20, all of us were like, oh, okay, they're going to lose this game. If they had like a 17 point lead, whatever it was like, no, they're going to lose a game. And they fucking did. Oh my God.
We even said it on playback, if memory serves. We were like, I don't feel good. Because that's the thing. There are these types of games where when we do playback, where typically like there's the old cynicism, which I totally get, the PTSD for you, John, where it's like, I don't feel good about this. And typically I try to err on the side of, oh, look, this team, I feel better about it. And not a single one of us felt confident about this as it started to chip away. Yeah. And that was emblematic. It was just the whole point of last season came down to this. This was a microcosm of everything that we saw. And God, I'm so glad that season's done because
awful.
Terrible.
Hold on.
Well, I want Andrew to get in here.
So how honest are we getting about what this game actually, other elements of this game that led to frustration? Because there's another element that is more internal and more personal in the discourse around a certain head coach.
Oh, yeah.
How a certain host of this podcast feels about a head coach and how other people at this network feel about this head coach. And I remember you two spending the whole first half that the Knicks built a 28-point lead arguing about Tibbs on playback. And then I remember watching the second half being like, let's put that shit to bed and watch them close this out and them slowly blow another 20-point lead, as John said. Because it was a snowball. There was the Lakers game where it was like, Tibbs, do something different. Like Jeff Van Gundy literally said the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And you're throwing the same rotation out there. The Laker game happens. Then we have our first real intervention. Like, are we allowed to say that Tibbs is doing bad things? Then they blow the Utah game. Then the Denver game, they get blown out and he leaves RJ in the game at the end. Then the next day's the trade deadline. Then the Blazer game you reference.
Well, they beat the Warriors. They beat the Warriors, and what was
about to get to that. About to get to that. Randomly in the middle of this, the best win of the season, non-RJ Barrett buzzer beater related. Yeah. They beat the Warriors on the road in Golden State. Then they
the Thunder overtime
eventual champion Warriors, by the way. Then the Thunder overtime game, as you mentioned, a game they could have won and they lost. And then the snowball effect is the nail in the coffin, I thought, of a 3-18 stretch. And
3-17, I think, but yeah.
Important clarification. I thought that we all kind of needed a break in that moment.
Yes.
I think the three of us can testify personally that we were all just kind of at each other's necks at a very frustrating time in the season and in our coverage of the Knicks. And I got to be honest, it's the most important all-star break, I think, in our tenure together. Because I was just like, this is not fun. Like, this is supposed to be a fun job, and I'm not having fun. Oh, why I honestly thought this was going to be a higher pick, Jeremy. But I'm glad we got some other things in before we brought this up.
It was so miserable. And you bring up Tibbs. I mean, in retrospect, looking at that stretch and then looking at how long it took him to make the changes he made. And then you look at the beginning of the season, it's actually kind of shocking that he didn't get canned early this year, if not last year, but he didn't. And, we'll see how that works out.
It's why my take was always someone step in, tell him his job is safe. So that way we could see a different rotation. Cause I believed what you were saying. This is the lineup he believes is his best chance to win. And I wanted someone to step in and be like, listen, you're safe. Let's give Quickly a look at point guard for 2 months. And I believe that's why we saw Jericho Sims be the backup center for 2 months.
Well, that was the first. I believe
that's why and look, to his credit, best defensive rating in the league after the All-Star break. Yeah. The Alec Burks starting lineup was a positive for the entire season. It didn't matter. Like we should have taken a look at some of the younger players, and I'm glad we got this all out. There we go. Okay,
it's a great pick.
You have another pick.
Yeah, you have one more.
Yeah, but also I don't see what pick this one would have come before. You know what I mean? Like I feel as though
there are worse playoff losses. Yeah. it's fresh. That
Yeah.
wound was a year and a half ago.
No,
you know?
I think Andrew's right. I think it probably should have gone earlier. I just thought it would be there, but it's a good job by you. All right, you have another one.
So here's where I'm struggling. I recognize that if I don't take a Knicks playoff loss, that there aren't enough of them really to go around that are that crushing, that by the time it would get to me, I would have to pick a bad game. And I mentioned it earlier because I thought maybe one of them would be taken, and I don't know what it is. And so this is because I wasn't even watching at this time, I'm going to potentially expose, like, there's a very distinct possibility that you guys say, oh no, you should have picked the other one. And if that's the case, then I'll just plead ignorance. But I'm going to go all the way back to Y2K.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to take a Pacers game, Knicks Pacers. Now, I was thinking about taking the last game. Well, actually, let's think about this in terms. Let me again.
Game 6 is the game. Game 6
Game
is
six,
the
right.
game. Game 6
Yeah,
is
game
the game.
6 is the game.
Okay, that was my initial thought. I'm going to stick with that. So I'm going to go with 2000 Game 6, Patrick Ewing's last game as a Knick. Obviously, it was pretty tough to lose to the Pacers at home for Game 6, right, Andrew? Because Game 5 was in Indiana.
Yeah, the game
Right?
was at
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
and it was Reggie getting over the hump again at MSG, and this time to get to the finals. So
Pretty depressing. I mean, again, it feels like I have two playoff games that not only are they Game 6, but feel like ends of eras. The good news for this one, at least, was that Game 6 against the Pacers in 2000 was not the high water mark for the New York Knicks. That would have been Game 7 against the Houston Rockets in 1994. But we're not talking about the 90s or the 1900s. We're talking about the 2000s. And in terms of, Reggie Miller going for 34 points? I'm looking here. Spree, he had 32, which is great. But Ewing even going for 18 and 12 as his body was breaking down in 37 minutes. Just, I want to open the floor to you guys because you experienced it. So that's my pick, but please give the color commentary.
I'll just say of this isn't the least painful of the playoff losses in which of years where the team made it to at least the second round. Obviously they lost to the 72 win Bulls, which was like, okay, we figured that was coming. In 98, they lost to the Pacers in the East semis in what was kind of a non-competitive series. That was another one where it was like, it was painful, but it was like not as painful as this because they kind of made it as close. That said, this doesn't rank for me anywhere near Miami in 97 or Houston in 94 or Chicago in 93, or honestly for me, maybe because of the age I was, Indiana in 95, which for me was like still that'll always be the number one for me, even ahead of Houston, which I know doesn't make any sense, but just one of those things. It's a good pick. I think you got, I mean, again, it's you've been going chalk, and I think it might work out for you.
Well, so to your point, John, there are clearly more painful losses in the 90s that would supersede this.
In the 90s.
Or this draft, I think this is, Jeremy has the three value picks that I think would rank the highest, because
it's a great job.
You want to talk about frustration. The Cam Thomas game is up there. And then it's two Pacer losses. By the way, John, you have a thing you are now charged with doing. Because Jeremy took two Pacer losses. I took two Boston losses. You don't have to take two Heat losses. Just a note for when it's your turn to take playoff losses. So the reason why this is perfect for being the sixth pick in this draft and not anywhere like first or second is, while it's the conference finals, like the sadness of it was like, all right, we've exhausted this run. Like this was the end of the Ewing era. Reggie finally gets one over us to get to his only finals. As far as like having 34 points, just took our hearts out in that fourth quarter, had 17 points. Rewatched that game during the pandemic, and Captain, Ewing looking as old as he had to that point. And then it showed when he went to Seattle, like, oh, you're a backup center now. Like you're like a 17-minute player. It really drove that point home. Yeah, it's a good pick, Jeremy. This is, I gotta be honest, there's a pick the next year that probably would have been ahead of it as far as heartbreaking, but this being Ewing's last game, I think, is why I agree with the pick, So all right, it's my turn.
Yeah.
And I can't take any more playoff losses. So let's go to the regular season and look at.
Oh yeah, you're out of playoff losses.
Yeah, I got my two. I'll take it. Yeah. So John, you have.
Well, this is great because that means I don't
have the field. Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm gonna go to a game that, and I think there's a theme with mine where I'm trying to put positive spins on it. So we all know how the summer of 2010 went, where while we all thought we were getting LeBron and John, you and I thought we were getting LeBron.
I thought so too.
We all thought they were getting LeBron, and then it didn't happen, and they get the Heatles on was it a Wednesday night in MSG? The Knicks had already won 6 straight games, and the Boston Celtics come into town. And it's clear the Knicks are back. There's a vibe at MSG. Danilo Gallinari is having good games. Wilson Chandler, Raymond Felton, the starting 5 with center Amari Stoudemire, who's in the MVP race. And it's like the Knicks have figured something out. Like the Knicks are back. They may not have gotten the big prize, but they got a prize. And they're going neck and neck down the stretch with the Boston Celtics, the defending Eastern Conference champions. And then Paul Pierce hits a jumper over Amari Stoudemire to give the Celtics a 2-point lead with 0.4 left. And then on the other end of the court, the Knicks inbound the ball to Amari for a 3. He hits it pure, nothing but net. And then the replay shows that the ball was still in his hands when time expires. So I'll go with the Amari near buzzer beater.
Was that 2010 or 2011?
It was a 2010-11 season, but it happened in 2010. So technically in 2010. I'll get the date for you, but
no, it's fine.
Was there ever a moment that you thought, "Oh my God, we won," or in the moment you're like, "Oh, that was in his hands"?
I remember watching this. I was at a 5 napkin burger or something in like Queens randomly. I don't know, but I thought they won it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You also thought they won it, Jeremy?
Yep.
All right. Yeah. This was December 15th, 2010. So, all right, Jeremy, you're up.
No, I'm up. I have 2.
John, you're up and you have 2.
Yeah, and neither of these will be playoff losses because you guys have all your playoff losses, so I don't have to. There's no risk of.
We didn't really strategize that out well, Jeremy, did we? we now gave him the field.
I did it on purpose. I knew that. Look, you're talking about games from 2021, really, because they're 2022 and 23 are in their own brackets. So yeah, I could find of the 82, assuming pandemic aside, games per year. And a lot of them are going to be losses. We have our pick of the litter for bad losses, whereas playoff games, there aren't a ton of them. So capitalize on the scarcity. Supply and demand, baby. Economics 101. But take your pick.
Yeah, I don't mind because you guys took good playoff losses in terms of for the purposes of this exercise. If we're talking heartbreak, I actually don't know if my top 2 have been taken yet, but I'll get to those later. Okay. So I have the 2 picks for me right now. One is going to be a loss during the ill-fated 21-22 season, which we just spoke about extensively. And another is going to be a loss from another season somewhere along the way. Because I already took one of those, the dream week, as it were. There's 2 very different directions I could go here as far as like what made the loss bad and why it resonates. I have to go with the loss from a meme, or that it created a meme that I've used just so many times. December 2nd, 2019.
Yes.
Not a date that should stand out in anybody's mind, unless you saw a certain picture of a certain head coach smiling ear to ear, baby. Paint some Joker makeup on that motherfucker. David Fizdale, as his team is in the process of getting blown out 132 to 88. Man, couldn't have been happier. Like he just won the lottery. Clapping it up on the sideline. I think his team probably made like a 4-0 run or something as they're coming back to the timeout. He had so lost his mind by that point. I genuinely believe this. And sure, I mean, he probably knew what was coming. He got fired. What was it, 3 days later or 4 days later? One more game. They got annihilated the next game to the Nuggets, and then he got fired. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there was to say about that one other than long live David Fizdale and his axe, wherever it may be.
I got another one.
I think you remember this one pretty well.
Oh, yeah. The moment you said that date, I knew. Yeah, I think he was fired after the Nuggets game of December 6th or something. Yeah. So, yes, that meme is great. I think what's also hilarious is the look that Bobby Portis is giving David Fizdale as he's coming back to the bench in the timeout. Just like, dude, we're down by 30 points, 32 points. It's just, so good. Yes, I think if that's one of the games that really just hammers home that type of, They
were down 72 to 45. They got outscored in all 4 quarters somehow. Somehow they managed to get outscored in all 4 quarters. 33 to 15 after the first quarter. It was just, I mean, you want to talk about the bloodbath of bloodbaths. Not a fair fight, as it were.
Real quick. The only thing to add is this was 4 months after Katie and Kyrie chose Brooklyn, and as much as we were trying to spin zone it, this was rock bottom. This was the next trip to rock bottom.
Yeah, it took them to 4-17.
Yeah, so it was. I mean, look, Woj gets shit for the rudderless ship that he called the Knicks, but I was like, all right, what's the plan here? Which is why, Jeremy, you bringing up the first win of the Leon Rose era. In hindsight, that being a turning point is actually pretty cool to look back 3 years ago and be like, all right, that season was a mess. Like 2 months before that game that Jeremy picked, the game John picked happened, but yeah, this was an official trip to rock bottom, and yet they still got blown out the next game by 31 points as well.
But shout out, by the way, to current Nick Dante DiVincenzo, scored 11 points in that game. There you go. Okay, now I need to take a loss from the 21-22 season, and I mean, again, great job, Jeremy, taking the one that I don't know why I didn't think to myself like that was going to get picked early. That's a bad job. So a couple different directions I could go here. Again, I've narrowed it down to 2 for different reasons. I have to do this. There's a loss that I think is a worse loss, but I wasn't on camera for it. So I am going with the game where I decided, for I don't know why, whatever reason, You know what? Let me hop on into a solo playback tonight. I think Jessica had DM'd me like, "Hey, we'd love to see you with do a playback." So I was like, "Yeah, sure." They're playing the Suns tonight. You never know, something good can happen. And what happened that night? Knicks got off to a nice start. We're playing pretty well. Julius Randle got into it with I think Cam Johnson. Got himself ejected. And then the Knicks, I forget how much they were up, but they blew a late lead. Which was the exclamation point on that was Cam Johnson hitting a buzzer-beating 3, and it was just womp womp all the way home. So, that is my loss from 2 years ago.
Couple things about this game. As you mentioned, Julius Randle gets ejected in the third quarter because of a kerfuffle with Cam Johnson. Only played 28 minutes, which meant we got to see... Oh, and Obi Toppin was hurt. So we didn't even get to see Obi Toppin minutes. So everything that everybody was clamoring for, we didn't even get to see. Tibbs, they had a good... They had built a lead, as you mentioned, and he went back to Fournier in the fourth quarter, which led to the fourth quarter comeback by the Suns, in which they outscored the Knicks 34-21. Speaking of 21, guess how many points Cam Johnson had in the fourth quarter? Which was
it 21?
It was 21 points on 6 of 7 from 3. Yeah, that was not great. And like the three he hit to be the buzzer beater, John, was preceded by 2 Alec Burks missed free throws that could have made it a 4-point game, which again was the icing on the cake.
And while I don't disagree that the Nets game was rock bottom, this was the 17th loss in 20 games. So it was, and after this, they actually, I think, had they had a winning record the rest of the season after this, but not that it mattered. RJ Barrett 6 for 26 in this game, by the way, for what it's worth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
2 of 10 in the fourth quarter. There you go.
Meanwhile, just shout out Mitchell Robinson, 17 and 15 with 4 steals and 3 blocks. He was perfect from the field in this game.
There you go.
8 for 8. Okay. Those are my 2 picks.
So my next pick will also be a near buzzer beater. I'm going to the 2016 season.
26.
Shout out to the former unicorn. Technically the 2015-16. I want to say it was his like 13th or 14th NBA game.
Oh my God.
Knicks are down 95-93. Inbound pass goes to Kristaps Porzingis, hits a 3, and more so than the Amari shot, I thought this was pure. I still do not have video evidence that it was in his hands. For all I know, it was a fingernail, and there's no Zoom HD technology. So from my mind, it was still good. The refs wave it off. So he hits a 3.
Hornets, right?
Yes, it was the Hornets game. The Knicks would have been a Porzingis buzzer beater, and we would have been like, oh my gosh, we got one. Like we actually did. Like I remember how we all know how draft night went, but it would have been like, oh my gosh, they actually did have a guy fall to them, and we wanted Okafor or Russell, and we ended up with the actual better player than both of them. And of course, the shot didn't count. So I'm trying to stay optimistic with my losses, or at least my regular season losses. My 2 non-losses from the last 2 seasons, I'll stick with 2 near buzzer beaters where I thought they won, and I can give them a moral victory, but they just needed 0.1/10 of a second left to be victories.
You definitely have a strategy, and you're sticking to it. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one.
I had this in my mind, but I didn't think this was going to get picked. I thought
really,
I had it in my mind too. I didn't think it was.
I was going to be like, okay, here's an honorable mention, because it did. I hear you, but the ball was very clearly on his fingertips. He just happens to look like Ichabod Crane, where his hands stretch all the way to South Carolina in that game. But they absolutely, he was touching the ball. I think it was a good review call, unfortunately.
Jeremy, you're up for 2.
I am indeed. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop up a game from this past season, because there weren't a ton of bad losses this past season. There were some.
Speak for yourself. I have some honorable mentions afterwards, but
honorable mentions, but not bad enough considering how the season went.
So I'm curious where you're going.
I'm going to go with the other Dallas game.
That's okay.
I'm going to go with the Mavs Knicks. Mavs 121, Knicks 100. I distinctly remember this was around the time of the World Cup. Wait, was it? No, there was some sporting event that was happening that day where I believe,
I don't know. I just know.
No, you're right. It was the
World Cup. So I missed the first half of the game because I was watching the World Cup, and I thought, all right, cool. Knicks are up 7 at halftime. And then I get to another bar to watch a different World Cup game, and they've got MSG on. And so I'm trying to split my attention, thinking like, all right, I'll rewatch the Knicks game later, but let's check in every now and then. And it's just a barrage of threes by the Mavs, outscoring the Knicks 41-15 on a Saturday afternoon. And that was just the third quarter, mind you. Then the Knicks kept it close in the fourth quarter. They only lost to that quarter 28-26. But just how crushing it felt to lose to the Mavs, where Tim Hardaway Jr. also goes off and has 28 points. And you, like, it's funny because I had tickets to the game the next day. And I so distinctly remember, listening to the post game, and John, you're like, well, Donovan Mitchell is going to score 40 points. Knicks are going to get blown out. And Tom Thibodeau is going to get fired and all these things. And it felt like we're on the precipice of something.
It was the end.
And I even remember tweeting through the pain of that game, being like, oh yeah, as Tibbs being like, hey, this doesn't work, but I'll keep doing it. Like, oh, that doesn't work, I'll keep doing it. Like, it just was so maddening. And by that point, like the Knicks are 10-13. And you're starting to feel like, okay, 2021 was a complete fluke because last season was crap and this year is going downhill and all these different ways of going about it. And of course, the next day, the Knicks destroy the Cavs, hold them to 81 points, which would not have been the lowest that they held the Cavs to in the season, mind you. But so it felt like every time it felt like that was the nail in the coffin. The Knicks last season did something to win where it was like, okay, there's a little bit of breathing room here. And this game just felt, I don't know, there's just so much, I don't say shame, but just so many cynical thoughts started to pop into my head. And this is a tough one. And it's only because of the other Mavs game that this was not the worst Mavs loss of the season.
It was yet another double-digit first half blown lead, by the way.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, it was when, if you remember the game, they had a double-digit first half. They got up in the first half. The Mavs made a push. The Knicks then got more of the lead back. They had a nice little run after the Mavs made a push. So it was like, okay, briefly, it was like crisis averted. I will just say, and we don't have time to get into it right now. I think that there is an argument that this was the most important regular season game of, I don't know how crazy we want to get. I think in a long time, because, Jalen Brunson made his comments afterwards. This isn't on the coach. This is on us. And obviously they won 8 in a row after that. Tibbs made the changes in the rotation, whether it was up to him or whether he was like, oh, I'm getting fired anyway, I might as well do it. Who knows? It's a great pick. You have another one, Jeremy.
I do.
Yeah, another one. Let me just say one thing about this, because the Tibbs of it all is obviously looming large over this. The thing I love about the way you both recognize the reason why this loss belongs to have recognition, as far as frustration goes, in the moment, there is a lost JPEG of a cover art I made for a Tom Thibodeau has been fired post-game live stream that I ended up never using. I remember
I wrote a newsletter that night, Andrew. This is it. Done. He's done.
We all thought the same thing. I'm making the same point as you. Yeah. We all thought, oh, so this thing's ending tomorrow. Sean before the season, Sean with the W, predicted 12-4 after they lose that matinee weekend where they lose to the Mavericks, lose to Donovan Mitchell. It'll be that they'll fire him the next day, and then it's a clean slate because there's 2 days off. And the look of shock that I had when I see Deuce McBride come off the bench in the first half, and it's like, oh, so there's no Derrick Rose. Oh, so there's no Cam Reddish. Okay, we might have some cooking going on here.
If the Cavs hadn't had I think it was their worst shooting game of the year, and if the refs hadn't set an NBA record by calling 8,000 traveling, palming, whatever violations, who knows? Who knows if things go differently? But anyway, yeah, it's a great pick. All right, your next one, Jeremy.
So I totally understand. For context, I've gotten both my playoff losses out of the way. I've gotten last season and the season before. So now I have 20 plus years of Knicks regular season losses to choose from. I get why you picked the Fizdale game, because it was just meme worthy and hilarious, and just like one of those moments where you have to laugh at how pathetic everything truly is. But to me, when looking at that season, it was not the inflection point, because there was one that had already happened. And that was on a Sunday evening in November. I'm coming back from a weekend in Madison, Wisconsin. Saw the Badgers beat can't even remember what Iowa's team.
Cornhuskers?
No, that's Nebraska.
Oh, the Iowa State.
No, that's the Cyclones.
Dreams.
No, it's Hawkeyes. It's the Hawkeyes. I got
the Hawkeyes. There you go.
Sorry, Iowa fans, but that was also a great game in Madison. And I land and I see the Knicks lose to the Cavs, 108-87. This was
God, it's a great pick.
21-point loss.
It's a great pick.
The Knicks fall to 2-8. But that isn't the storyline. No, the storyline is after a summer in which it seemed Kevin Durant and a co-star were promised, the Knicks wound up with not that. And so James Dolan as upset as he is, pushes the front office key members to the media, and Steve Mills delivers the classic line, "We're not happy with where we are." And to that, I thought, no fucking shit, Steve.
Yeah.
So the thing about
this is cheating because that's not the game.
It's but
it's the game that caused the
but
thing.
It is the game because again,
the game within the
21-point loss at home to the Cavs, who, mind you, were not exactly a great team themselves because they lost all of their best players outside of Kevin Love sticking around. To do that, for the Knicks to now have a win-loss record through 10 games of 200, for all of the frustration that had built, it erupted when Colin Sexton scored 31 points. Keep in mind, there was probably the thought of, wow, the dude who was picked right before the Knicks picked Kevin Knox managed to do that. So it was a pretty bad night. And I would say, considering how the game inspired them being trotted out for the press conference, the impromptu press conference, I consider them as the same. Like if we're thinking about David Fizdale getting fired a few days later, we got to think about the same night this happening. So
I'm screwing around with you. It's a
I know this
call.
Was egregious, and this was the lowest point for the Knicks that season.
You remember what happened the week before? The literally 7 days earlier, they dropped to 1-6 in a 21-point blowout loss at home to the Kings.
Okay. No, it was a 1-5. They went 1-5 and they lost by 28 to the Warriors.
No, I'm staring right at it. They lost to the Kings.
The 2018-19 season?
Yeah.
No, this is 1920.
No, this is 1920. This is 1920.
Oh, wait. Am I thinking? Okay, never mind. Yeah.
No, you just have the wrong game log.
I have the wrong one lined up. But even
what
still,
I remember was the week before them losing, and Fizdale had RJ out there, rookie RJ Barrett, and he played him 40 minutes in a blowout. And then when asked about his minutes load, game 7 into his rookie season, Fizdale goes, well, Latrell Sprewell was playing 40 minutes a game, 82 games a year. And it was like, oh my gosh, we went backwards. Oh my God, this is not good. Like crisis, abort like that. And then the following week, this game you're picking happens. And it was very much, we're trending downward.
And then about a week later in the first game I covered in person, for SI Nick, shout out to them. The Devontae Graham buzzer beater to the Hornets, lead the Hornets to a win over the Knicks. That was heartbreaking. There was so many terrible losses over those first month of that season of differing varieties. But this is a really good call.
So I have 2 picks left, and one has to be a loss from this most recent season, which I got to be honest, I don't have one outside the 2 Dallas games that's coming to mind. And then one from the previous season, the one that's sandwiched in between these 2 very successful seasons that have good memories. You sense a theme of me trying to stay positive. So what I'm going to do, shout out to Mensa and the RJ Hive. I'm going to go to the first game after the All-Star break of this season, February 25th, 2022, in which Rowan Alexander Barrett Jr. on 22 field goal attempts scored a career high 46 points. Man, did I want him to get a win for this one. I thought this was the first time that we saw like the realized version of RJ, just recognized at a certain point, oh, Tyler Hero can't guard me. And it's honestly shown true every single time he plays Tyler Hero, which is why Tyler Hero going down against the Heat was even more frustrating because they actually lost the RJ Barrett target that was out there. But shout out Duncan Robinson for filling in amicably. The guy went 14 of 22 from the free throw line. You hit your free throws, you're looking at a 50-point RJ Barrett game. I know this doesn't go to worst losses, but I would have loved to have RJ get 40 plus in this game and then it lead to a victory as well. So I'm sticking with the positive theme of, yes, it was a loss and it stinks that they lost the RJ Barrett career high, but it still was a sign of what things could be in the RJ Barrett tenure.
I was in Florida for this game. I was on my annual trip down to visit my mom in February. And I wanted the game for him too, but it was a really cool experience, especially as Jeremy picked the Nets game going into the All-Star break, to come out of the All-Star break and kind of have something a little bit more positive to have to latch on to was definitely cool.
National TV too. Go ahead, Jeremy.
It was a great game. Fantastic. I love that positive angle. I have to also bring one thing into the fold here, which was that this is the game where Quentin Grimes got hurt 14 seconds into playing. And it was a bummer because hoping to see a lot more from him. And while he did come back, he just didn't look healthy, didn't look great. So, yes, it was great from the RJ perspective. I was definitely hoping this would be a win, definitely hoping you'd get to 50, but it was a loss. And while you could hang your head up high, I was like, okay, but like we just went through the process of shutting down the older players to play the younger players, and Grimes is now not even able to really do that.
Can I add two more notes from the box score, Jeremy?
Please do.
So you want to talk about losing Quentin Grimes? Apparently they lost Julius Randle too, because Julius Randle had 2 of 15 in this game. This was in the midst of a Julius Randle fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, hi Evan Fournier, 5 of 16 in this game. So between those two starters, Alec Burks, a perfectly fine and adequate 4 of 6 and 12 points. Like that's what you want out of your starting point guard.
Yeah, RJ needed some help, and he ran out of gas in the fourth and didn't get it, unfortunately.
Bingo. So that'll be my pick.
And now you have a loss from this past season left, right?
That's the only one I have left. Yes, which I've been leaning positive throughout this pod. I don't have a loss that sticks out that isn't 1 in 13,884 and one that kind of.
Oh wait, no, hold on.
No, my only loss remaining that I have to pick. Is
okay, but now I go. I draft.
Season. You get 2 picks. Yes.
Now I get
my 2 playoffs.
Yeah, my 2 playoff losses. Okay. So the first one's going to be easy, and it was always the one I was leaning towards for my personal most painful playoff loss. Even if it's gets completely forgotten and lost to time. I think one of you guys may have mentioned it earlier on the pod. Game 5 against the Raptors in 2001. Because you gotta consider my age, at least. Like I started following the Knicks in 1993, and all I ever knew in the entirety of that time was a Knicks team that, like, well, obviously we're going to make it to the second round. Like crappy teams lose in the first round, to say nothing of teams that don't even make the playoffs. So like the notion that it was, I know we didn't have Ewing anymore, but we still had Sprewell, we still had Houston, like Glenn Rice was there, a little bit disappointing, whatever. All of that stuff was immaterial to the fact that we were the Knicks. Knicks didn't lose in the first round, and they were up 2-0 against the Raptors. And like, oh great, we're gonna take care of business against the Raptors, and then we'll face whoever we're gonna face in the next round. And the Knicks spent most of that season. They were the 3rd best team in the East. I had no reason to fear, and sure enough, they were down in that fourth quarter in Game 5. They made a nice comeback. It was 85-83 with 2.5 minutes left. And then they just ran out of gas, missed a bunch of shots, missed some free throws. Nothing good happened. And I don't really need to say much about what happened in the years that followed.
Only thing I'm going to add to that, happily married man at the moment, right?
Yes.
Ex-fiance is Canadian. Only time I've ever been to the Air Canada Center was with her. And at this point, it was 2012 when I was there. And you know what is on display in 2012 before Kawhi or anything there? Is Anthony Davis, not Anthony Davis, Antonio Davis, celebrating on the Madison Square Garden court because they hadn't won a single fucking thing to that point in their franchise's history. It's a Chris Bosh 3rd team All-NBA selection and some Vince Carter moments in the dunk contest. And this playoff series, this was the entirety of their accomplishments as a franchise. You're welcome, honestly, you're welcome for Kyle Lowry that the Knicks didn't take him and you were able to accomplish something as a franchise, Canada. So there.
Jeremy, anything on this game? I
not really. Yeah.
You said this is the year before you started like following the Knicks, right?
Exactly. So I'm glad you guys.
It was painful in the moment. It was as painful.
I'm sure.
And to John's point, the way you described, or at least you brought up Game 6 against the Pacers in like the finality of the Ewing era. This was also a finality. It's like, oh, we're losing first round playoff series now. We haven't felt this in a long time. So, that frustration set in.
For my second pick, I feel like the chalk pick is, for as much as it is recent, Game 6 against Miami of this year. I'm not going to make it because that would be disingenuous, because I wasn't sad. I was sad. I was disappointed, but like I wasn't heartbroken. I respected that Heat team probably more than most, and I thought they were the better team, and I thought that they deserved to win. And it was disappointing, but that's not it. I part of me wants to go with Game 1 against the Hawks 2 years prior, because I feel like that season, that series kind of ended with that game. I'm not going to go there either because it was such an electric atmosphere at the Garden that night. And I could go with Game 1 against Indy in 2013 because, much like maybe with Miami this year, you could argue that that's where they lost the series. I'm not going to go with any of those three. Instead, I'm going to go with something that might be a little obscure. Game 3 against the Celtics in 2011, the game after the game that you took, Andrew, where Carmelo Anthony scored 42 points, because the Carmelo Anthony trade was such a big deal because we felt like we got another guy. You know, we got a guy to help support Amare, and like our time as contenders started now, and like. After the you spoke about eloquently about how you were feeling actually really good after Melo scored 42 and they lost at the last second because, hey, what does Pat Riley say? Playoff series doesn't start until the home team loses a game. Well, the Knicks went home next time out and they got whooped 113-96. They went down 0-3 in the series. It was to say that this was not a competitive game is a bit of an understatement. The Knicks actually outscored the Celtics by 6 points in the fourth quarter. So this game, it was not even as close as 113-96. Carmelo Anthony went, I'm looking at now, 4 for 16 in this game. Amare 2 for 8. It was a shellacking, and for all the good vibes that I had coming down the stretch of that season, I know there were some rocky moments down the regular season stretch, but like feeling like, okay, we got our guy. This is what we've been building up to. We've arrived. And then coming off of that, the good feeling Game 2, to have this game be just such a letdown. And then they obviously got swept a couple days later in what was also not a very competitive game. I'm going with my heart on this one, and I'm going to pick this game.
I'm surprised you didn't go Game 1. The Ray Allen not buzzer beater, but Ray Allen hitting a 3 to give we got frustrated by Bam Adebayo illegal screens, the Kevin Garnett illegal screen to get Ray Allen open. I think by Game 3, I was resigned to the fact that Simmons has talked about this. When you lose a game like the Knicks did in Game 1 or even Game 2, it's so much harder to come back in a series because then it feels like you don't have to win 4. Because you gave one away, you have to win 5 or you have to win 6. So by Game 3, I was so like, all right, this isn't the year. Like they'll retool, they'll actually add to this Melo Amari core, and lo and behold, they kind of did for 2 years, and then the rest is history. I mean, it's fair pick. Any of those Celtics losses, I'm surprised. Maybe not surprised, but Game 1, we can talk about playoff losses now. Game 1 against the Heat in 2012, when they go on that 30-1 run in the first half. Sure. LeBron on a flop gets called. Well, so LeBron draws a flagrant foul on a screen by Tyson Chandler, and it's like the Academy Award goes to King James. Also, Amon Shumpert gets injured in the first quarter of that game, tearing his ACL, and the speculation for the rest of that series was Jeremy Lin is at 65-70%.
Yep.
Is he going to play? And after Game 1, I was like, just let him rest. Like, we're going to lose this series. So those are the only other ones from that stretch that I would throw in. So a loss from last season. So you guys brought up we got the 2 Mavs losses. Those are the 2 that stand out to me.
I think there's another obvious one.
There's another obvious one. So can I talk? So let me talk through it. There's the Spurs game that was annoying.
That's not it.
There's the Bobcats game wasn't not the Bobcats. The Hornets game was annoying. It ended the winning streak, and Jalen Brunson missed it.
annoying, not
It's not
terrible.
it for me.
Oh my gosh!
I can't believe you're
missing
forgetting
one.
this
Think,
one.
maybe John and I are thinking of different games. For me, think about a game in which the Knicks had the lead. They lost the lead.
Uh-huh.
They blew it, lost the game. It was a playback night, and it was also on national television.
I
That's
forget
the
if
game
this was on
I would
national
be
TV,
picking
but
if
I think
I
we're thinking of
had
the same
not-
game.
Picked the game I picked. And if John hadn't picked the game he picked.
The game I'm thinking of happened like a week or 5 days or so before the second Mavs game.
Mine happened early on in the season as well.
So there's a Memphis game. There's a Raptors game.
The Memphis game was rough. The Raptors game was the Bulls
Not it.
game. They
That
missed
wasn't
more
it for me.
free throws
the
down the
RJ
stretch.
game. Okay,
That wasn't
I
it for
can
me.
pick. I was on the post
Mine-
game for that, so yeah, I'll pick that one.
Okay.
All right, the Bulls game. What's yours, Jeremy?
Mine was the Hawks.
So
Oh, the early
early
season
season
Hawks
MSG.
game.
that made them
Yeah.
3 and 4, right? Or three,
But it's
either
the-
3 and 3. Or
it
3
was
and
also
4. Yeah.
the prevailing thought of DeJounte Murray and the whole trade conversation that occurred
Mhm.
there, and having to hear Reggie Miller and the Knicks and talking about blown leads, and then they blow the lead and they lose that game. But the Bulls one was like pulling teeth.
It's 4 missed free throws in the last minute of the game. 2 by Grimes, 2 by Brunson, and then Grimes fouls DeRozan there in the last. I mean, it was just like I said that night. I said we could watch basketball for 20 years and never see a game like this. And then 5 days later, there was another game where I was like, "Oh, remember that game where I was like, we could watch basketball for 20 years and never see anything like this?" This exponentially supersedes that.
This just goes to show you how immaculate the vibes became over the rest of the season. That yeah, that's absolutely a good pick, and I'll take it. The Bulls game, because I did the post game that night. I completely forgot how miserable that post game was.
Oh,
that guys, RJ had 44 points in that game. I texted
That's
Mensa,
right.
Yep.
come on the post game.
It's
We got an
fantastic.
RJ Barrett game, and yeah, this happens. So
Because I was sick, I think.
you were sick. I said,
Yeah.
come on, just to be with
Yep.
me and Mensa. We'll get your analysis.
And it was
We'll
supposed to be such a
have-
happy. It was supposed to be such a happy.
And then with like 60 seconds left, 4 missed free throws later, and a DeMar DeRozan and 1, and the Knicks lose.
Brutal.
So, all right, that'll be my pick. Good call.
Jeremy, your last pick.
I forgot about the Bulls one, so that remembering that that's correct, John. I would go with the Bulls one. Good pick, Andrew. So mine is all the losses from all these seasons. A lot to choose from, unfortunately, but that is there's an honorable mention one, which is another Mavs loss, which is when they lost by 50 at the Garden, the worst ever loss the Knicks have faced. That was in 2010. That was in January of 2010. I just want to read Mark Berman's lead for this.
Oh my God.
So it's somewhere Isaiah Thomas must be smiling. David Lee had modest goals as he sat glumly on the bench in the fourth quarter, watching the Knicks' worst Garden loss in their history. I was just hoping they wouldn't score a couple more points in a row and we'd be down 60, Lee said. Jason Kidd also did not play in this game. But no, I'm going to take a different game. Instead of the worst Knicks loss at MSG, I'm going to take their worst loss in the 2000s. In fact, I believe it's close to being their worst loss ever, but not quite. The Boston Celtics 104, the Knicks 59. This was during what season was this? This was
This is a D'Antoni season. Yeah, I
yes,
remember this.
correct. Yeah.
I honestly don't remember the game.
I remember the box score flashing up. I do remember
This
that.
was 2007. This is the 2007-2008 season.
Oh, yeah.
So
So this isn't a D'Antoni season. This is the last Isaiah season. That's correct.
Correct. Yeah. So the leading scorer for the Knicks that night, when they scored 59 total points, mind you, it went 16, 15, 10, 18, the 4 quarters, was Nate Robinson. Hit 11.
Good job, Nate.
Zach Randolph had 4, Quentin Richardson had 7, Stephon Marbury had 4, Jamal Crawford had 8, and Eddie Curry had 4. That is a combined, 11, 15, 23, 27 points. For context, Eddie House and Glenn Davis off the bench scored a combined 28 points. So very much an embarrassing time. I mean, this was obviously one of their worst seasons. This was 23 and
This is
59.
Yeah, and they actually
Yeah.
had their pick this year too.
They did. Yep. So this was actually the Isaiah Thomas year because it was 2007, 2008.
It's Isaiah's last year. Yeah,
It was
Yeah.
well. Walsh got brought in before the end of this season, but yeah.
Correct. So after they fired Larry Brown, Dolan was like, Isaiah, you coach a team. And then the Steve Francis game you mentioned.
That was Steve Francis. And then
that was that first season. And then the following season is when this game that Jeremy's referencing
all went
happened.
to hell.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, this
call.
has the combination of so many things that bother me. It's the loss to the Boston Celtics. It's losing, not even scoring 60 points, even in that era, especially when the Celtics scored 104. It's just perfect in terms of how this season went.
This is 07-08?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is their first game. This is their first game against the Big Three.
Yes, and I was just
going
to say, mind you, look, Celtics were 11-2 entering this game, 8-0 at home. They were clearly dominant. It's more that I was expecting the Knicks to score more than 59 points and to lose by less than, 45.
It was one of so many reminders over the last 20 plus years that there was us, and then there was like several large gaps, and then more gaps, and then more gaps, and then the contending teams in the league. And I think it's a great pick for that reason. Yeah, I draw just 2 honorable mentions of that.
Yeah, well, you shoot too.
The end of Linsanity. The Miami Heat game where he had as many turnovers as points.
So, John, I'll be complete. I'm stunned you didn't take this game.
I thought, so when I was going back and forth, I wanted to take the Dream Week game, and for my second loss, I had to go with the FSDA one because there's something that's genuinely sad to me about that game. Like when I think about it, and the spirit of what I wanted to get out of my 2 regular season picks from before the last couple of years was more just embarrassment as opposed to sadness. Just that was my personal preference. That's one. And then the other one's maybe a little obscure to some. It was a loss to the Nuggets early on in the 2021-22 season. It was a weekend. I watched the game on my phone in the car because my daughter had a birthday party, and it was the worst that I remember. Like this team, it was so disheartening because like the previous season, the We Here season, they tried so hard all the time, and this game it was like, oh wow, they don't even care at all. That's what it felt like, and I'm like, it was such a weird sensation, and I was like, what happened? How did this go so bad so fast? And then that was the game that afterwards Tibbs was like, maybe RJ should get in the gym and practice a shot more. And yeah, those are the only 2 honorable mentions that I had.
Jeremy, do you have any?
I do. Well, the one of them was the Mavericks game, the 50-point loss at the Garden. But another one, and there's kind of subtext here, so I'm cheating a little bit. January 23rd, 2018, the Knicks lost in Golden State to the Warriors. You might be thinking, well, I mean, they lost the Warriors, so what? There was frustration that was pent up with this team, and it manifested its way in Joakim Noah shoving Jeff Hornacek. And this was the very last game that Noah played for the Knicks, only played 4 minutes and 31 seconds. The previous game before that was with the against Spurs. The Knicks lost that one, played 2 minutes and 11 seconds. But for those of us who are actually deeply watching this season and very much invested, there was that one shining moment where Joakim Noah played 12 minutes against the Pelicans in New Orleans, scored only 4 points, had 4 fouls, but played well and showed a lot of emotion about I can still play and all this. And it just turned into everything that occurred in terms of the shoving, the separation, and then the Knicks deciding that stretching his contract would be a smart decision when it really wasn't. And all that jazz. But I'd like to also introduce one more thing, Andrew, before I kick it over to you.
Yeah.
A new category, actually, that's different from what we have talked about. And I introduced this to the record somewhat jokingly, but also I feel like because the Knicks were so bad, we could talk about all the losses, and they don't necessarily have an impact on what I'm about to say, but they also don't have no impact at all. I'd like to talk about regular season wins that actually hurt the Knicks in terms of their tanking efforts.
Oh man, I can't.
So-
I don't have the.
That's fine. You don't have to.
Indoor, ladies and
'cause I
gentlemen.
will. Yes. So there are two games that specifically come to mind, and both of them indirectly involve the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the first one is in 80 to 70. Actually, wait, before I go back, before I say that, I do have another honorable mention for worst losses. The 2021-22 season, third game of the year, Knicks lose to the Magic. The Magic were starting the youngest starting lineup of any team in NBA history. That was an embarrassing loss. That's probably when we should have recognized this is not great. But this game, 80 to 79, the Knicks win thanks to Tim Hardaway Jr. hitting a clutch shot. Cole Aldrich had 19 points. That impacted the Knicks in terms of they were keeping pace with the Timberwolves in terms of the lottery seeding. The Knicks then dropped, and then they fell in the lottery 2 spots, whereas the Timberwolves stayed at number 1, kept Karl Anthony Towns. And then the other one was in 2017, where the New York Knicks won 114 to 113 against the Sixers.
Yep.
They were 31-51 as this game ended. And yes, Andrew, if you want to talk about the Maurice Endor game, this was the Maurice Endor game where the Knicks were tied in the or they were ahead of the Timberwolves in the standings just barely, and they won this game, dropped them down. It's the final game of the season. Timberwolves lost their game to finish 31-51 as well. Coin flip determines the order. The Timberwolves fall to 7. I'm sorry, the Timberwolves win the tiebreaker, the coin flip. They pick 7th. The Knicks go 8th. We know how much that the Knicks and Phil Jackson wanted Lauri Markkanen. Lauri Markkanen, of course, was taken 7th overall. The Knicks took Frank Ntilikina 8th overall. So that game, I feel like, again, I know that the lottery is its own beast, but if we're talking about things that feel like losses in the moment, for so many fans who were embracing the tank, wins turned to losses, and that felt like that.
Good call.
Just take Donovan Mitchell or Bam, and then that pick looks great.
Agreed.
Like,
It's at that point, it's you get what you get, make the right call. But in that moment, if it's about like, oh, but the Knicks should have done this or that, I feel like, hey, might as well just for fun, let's talk about it.
The spirit of what you're talking about, I do agree. Those wins did feel like losses to those that were like rooting for them to lose for tanking positioning. I have 3 honorable mentions. The TJ McConnell buzzer beater. I know that this honestly, John, are you sure this isn't on your this isn't one of your honorable mentions for greatest wins? I know you feel about TJ McConnell, and
I do love me some TJ McConnell, but this game is part of why.
And then there's 2 losses, one from the 2016-17 season, and then one from the 17-18 season. December 7th, 2016, the Knicks get blown out by the Cavaliers, 126-94. LeBron and crew are seen at the end of the bench flipping a water bottle on the sideline.
I was wondering if this was going to come up.
And it was very much, even though the Knicks got off to like a fun start this season, it was like, oh, they're still a joke. Yep. Like this is the highlight of their 12-10 start. The Cavs are beating them by 30 points and then trying to flip a water bottle and see if it lands straight up on the bench at the end of the game. And then this is where I'll throw the Porzingis truthers a bone. I guess I'm kind of a Porzingis truther because I did enjoy the Porzingis era, but I also had the same injury concerns that a lot of people did about his frame. I'll just pick the game that he got injured. His last game, healthy game as a New York Knick. They lost by 14 to the Bucks. He jams one down on Giannis.
That's a great call.
But he ends up tearing his ACL. It's February 6, 2018. Never plays another minute for the New York Knicks.
That's a good one.
Can I tell you, I completely forgot about this game. This has an argument to be should have been the first pick in the draft.
It has an argument, yes. As far as regular season losses is concerned, it was on my list. Yeah,
did not. I actually would have crossed my mind.
I would have put this ahead of the other Porzingis game that you picked.
I went positive with my picks, Jeremy.
I understand why, but yeah,
that's a fantastic.
I co-signed feelings in the moment. I was. Again, there's been some healing. Getting to talk to the Mark Medina about where KP stands on everything right now. I am not ready to watch him play for the Celtics this season. There are going to be so many mixed emotions. But I mean, I'm over it as far as a Knicks perspective. Now he's going to be playing the Knicks 4 times this year. It was easier.
That's assuming
he was playing. Well, okay, fair
enough to play the Knicks 4 times.
That's assuming he's available for those 4 games. Good point. I figure that has to be mentioned. The last game Kristaps Porzingis played for the New York Knicks.
It's a great place to end it.
The TJ McConnell one, just before you wrap us up, I think that's a great call as well. And I believe there was a story that came of it after that triple-double win. I think that he went out to celebrate with his dad, and the bouncers like essentially turned him away because they tried to like, do you know who my son is? Not in a jerk way, but like, and they just had no clue. Like no one knew TJ McConnell. This kind of helped propel him a little bit further. But yeah, this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
I enjoy this. This was fun. Jeremy, I think you or Andrew, actually, I think it was you, Andrew, nailed it at the top where it's like, we could talk about this now because things are good and we could enjoy it. You know,
I'm proud of us that not a single loss from the 2023 playoffs got picked. But there were emotions that came out of that Heat series that have almost overtaken the Cavs series. And I'm glad that every win from the Cavs series got taken last week. That not a single loss.
That says a lot.
Yeah, I think it shows how we're processing this and shows how others may be processing it.
Listen, they better keep it going. We'll say that. And on that note, Jeremy, for Andrew and Jeremy, thanks for being with us these last several weeks as we've, as when we've continued to record throughout the summer, totally not taking any time off. And anything else before we get out of here?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you, and we will talk to you soon. Peace out.